Thanks for clicking on my video. 𝗧-𝗦𝗧𝗦 here, and in this video we're gonna be talking about what is the best budget GPU for mining Ravencoin. And this all came about because of me watching this video by Mr. 𝗧-𝗦𝗡𝗥𝗧𝗦, where he goes through sort of what will happen to the price of Ravencoin if it follows the sort of price trend of Bitcoin, because Ravencoin is about to have a halving of the block reward. So in this video he's like, what will the price of Ravencoin be if it follows the price trend of Bitcoin after its block reward happening? And so in this video I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but you should definitely go watch this. He sort of comes to the conclusion that there is a possibility that Ravencoin might hit $10 in January of 2023. Now this is obviously not financial advice, neither from him nor me, so you know, don't take it as such. But that got me thinking, what would be the most economical way to become a millionaire from mining Ravencoin, right? So let me explain what I mean. So what would be sort of the cheapest way of mining 100,000 Ravencoin by January of 2023? And so there are a few things to consider here, because as opposed to mining Ethereum, you can actually mine Ravencoin on 3 GB GPUs. Now for Ethereum, you need something, you need a graphics card with at least 5 GB because of the file size of the DAG file. But for Ravencoin, you can use 3 GB cards. Now you're probably going to want a 4 GB card because the DAG file will soon outgrow 3 GB. So you can only mine Ravencoin with a 3 GB card for another, I think, a few months or so. But a 4 GB card could mine Ravencoin for, I think, at least another year and a half or something like that. So definitely until, you know, January of 2023, which is when, you know, if this is true, which it's more just like a fun thought experiment. It could, but that would be when Ravencoin would hit $10, right? So what would be the cheapest possible way of mining 100,000 Ravencoin by 2023? So I have made a quite extensive spreadsheet here where I have listed all of the Nvidia GPUs that I could possibly think of that could mine Ravencoin. And I'm just going to say right off the bat, I have not included AMD cards here because I am not very familiar with AMD cards. So I still think you might be able to find similar specs for AMD cards and similar findings, right? But this will do as a thought experiment, I'm sure. And I think this should be plenty. So let's start with what I have here, right? So here on the left-hand side, I've listed, how many is this? 23 different Nvidia GPUs, and they are all 4 GB or more. So they will be able to mine Raven for at least another year and a half or so. And let's just start right off the bat here with what do these green check marks versus orange sort of star symbols mean. So the green check marks mean that these are cards that make sense to mine Ravencoin specifically. So what do I mean by that? So let's take the 1060 6 GB card, for example. Well, since that is a 6 GB card, it can mine Ethereum. And since Ethereum is currently more profitable than Ravencoin to mine, it would make sense to just mine Ethereum and exchange that for Ravencoin. Yeah, I hope that makes sense because it's so much more profitable. So what do these green check marks mean then? Well, they mean that these are cards where either you cannot mine Ethereum, like this 1050 Ti, because that only has 4 GB, and this 1650, because that also only has a 4 GB memory on it, or that the card has a hash rate limiter for Ethereum. So like on the 3060, on the 3070 Ti, and on the 3080 Ti, kind of as well as the new LHR GPUs that are coming out, but I haven't included that because that would just make this into such a big mess. So let's move on here. I've listed the hash rates for Ravencoin that I could find for all of these cards. So these might look low to you, but you have to keep in mind that Ravencoin uses a different algorithm. So the hash rate is not going to look like the hash rate on Ethereum, right? So take a 1660 for example, right? Like that would get about 24, 25 mega hash on Ethereum. This is not a super, just a regular 1660, but on Ravencoin that only gets 12 mega hash. It's just because it's a different algorithm. It's a different sort of kind of calculations it has to done. So it does that at a slower rate, right? Cool. I think you understand. We can move on, right? So then, oh, by the way, I should say these hash rates, they were hard to find for some of the cards, especially like proper solid sources. So I want to give a few shout outs. One is to 𝗧-𝗦𝗡𝗏, who actually helped me by testing the hash rate on a 2080 Super, because he has a 2080 Super. So he tried like hashing Ravencoin for me just to see what kind of hash rate he could get on it. So thank you, 𝗧-𝗦𝗡𝗏. Great YouTube channel, go check him out. And I also want to give a shout out to Red Panda Mining, who has a spreadsheet of just hash rates for a lot of different cards, and most of them include Ravencoin. So that's where I also found a lot of these, and the rest I just found on like Reddit, and trying to get like multiple sources for each card to get a good sort of average of what kind of you could expect to get, right? And from that hash rate, I then derived how much Ravencoin can you get in one day, in 24 hours from that card. And here you can see a list of that. So for example, a 1050 Ti would get you about 12.5 Ravencoin per day, and a 3090 would get you 86.5 Ravencoin per day. And then out here you can also see how much power that card would consume during those 24 hours. Or no, not during those 24 hours, sorry. Just how much power it consumes, because for 24 hours you want to look at this kilowatt hour consumed per 24 hours. So there you can see power consumption, like actual consumption. And then out here I have listed sort of what's a reasonable price that you could actually find these GPUs for right now, at least where I am. Now, of course, it's kind of hard to find any GPU right now, but these are kind of not scalp prices, but kind of like if you were to kind of just either get lucky if it's a new card and be able to like buy it from a retailer, or if it's a sort of like older card like a 1050 Ti, what's kind of the going rate secondhand, right, on eBay and such. So GPU prices, I think you get that. And then what I first did was just, okay, just as a basic comparison, what would it take to mine 10,000 Raven on these cards? So how many days would it take? How much electricity would you consume? And what would then be the total cost? So that total cost would be the GPU price plus the power cost calculated at 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So for example, for a 1050 Ti, it would need almost 800 days to make you 10,000 Raven. And during those 10,000 days, during those 800 days, it would consume about 1260 kilowatt hours. So the total cost would be about $246. Yeah, this is not taking the block reward halvings into account, because, you know, 800 days would be, well, there would be at least one halving in there. But so that's not taking that into account. And that is because I just wanted sort of like a baseline comparison of these cards. So to put into perspective, and let's compare it to like a 3080 here, right? That would only take 108 days to make 10,000 Raven, and it would consume about 750 kilowatt hours. But because that card is so much more expensive, you're still ending up paying almost $1,500 for the same amount of Raven. But if you just got a 1050 Ti, you would only spend like $250. You know, that's the ballpark at least, right? So then, just doing the same thing but for 100,000 Raven instead, you can see the prices start to come together a little bit more, and that has to do with when you're doing then power efficiency starts to come more into play. Like the longer you run these GPUs, the more power efficiency comes into play, right? So for example, you're getting 6.7 mega hash at 60 watts here, you know, but here you're getting almost 50 mega hash at 290 watts. So, you know, here you're getting about 1 mega hash per 10 watts. But here you're getting, you know, not quite twice that, but you know, it's getting closer to twice that, you know. So the more you mine these, the less the initial price matters, as you can see here, because now for the 1050 Ti to mine 100,000 Raven, total cost would be almost $1,400. But for a 3080, I mean, it's still not great, but you know, it's a lot closer now at $2,100 total price here. But then, because we want to, you know, make $1 million, not financial advice, this is just a thought experiment, and it's more just a review of GPUs rather than anything like that. Anyway, so let's move on to how much Raven could you mine by January 2023 on these GPUs, and what would that look like? So this is taking the Ravencoin halving, like the block reward halving, into account. So what does that mean actually, a block reward halving? It just means for every new block that is mined. Right now I believe the block reward is 5,000 Raven per block. After the halving it will be half that at 2,500 Raven per block. Or it's 2,500 now, and then after the halving it's 1,250. I don't remember. I think it's 5,000 now and 2,500 after the halving. Anyway, that isn't really relevant. What is relevant is that by the 1st of January 2023, one single 1050 Ti will have mined you just below 5,000 Raven. The total cost for that will have been $210 roughly. And what that means is that you've put $210 into this, and you've got 4,800 Raven, right? So as long as the price of Ravencoin is at least 4.6 cents, you will have made all of your money back. Or basically, the GPU will have completely paid for itself and the electricity it consumed. So you got a free GPU, basically, right? So as long as Raven hits at least 4.35 cents, you will have had a return on the investment, right? But then for this next column here, so this is how much profit will you have made if Ravencoin actually goes up to $10, right? So this is minus the total cost of the GPU and the electricity as well. So with a 1050 Ti, if Ravencoin reaches $10 by January 2023, you will have made $48,000. Pretty good? Not gonna lie, pretty good. So let's just like walk down the list here. By the way, I don't know if I said, but these GPUs are currently sorted by like price of the GPU. Yeah, and we're gonna sort this spreadsheet a bit differently soon, but let's just go back to something like our 3080 again, right? So buying one 3080 and just letting it mine Ravencoin until January of 2023, you will have mined 35,334 Ravencoin. You will have had to put in about almost $1,800. So that's the price of the GPU plus the price of the electricity. And here you can sort of start to see the difference here, like because you've put in more money to get return on investment, Raven needs to be a bit higher. It needs to be over 5 cents in order for you to just make the money back, right? But also, because you've mined so much more Ravencoin at 35,000, if Raven were to go high, like $10 per Raven, right? You will also have a much larger profit at like $352,000, which that's pretty sweet. That is a pretty sweet profit. So now comes the real question here. Let's say you want to become a Ravencoin, well, a millionaire off of mining Ravencoin. What is actually the cheapest way of becoming that? Like, what is the GPU that will cost, you know, the least amount plus, like, including power cost to mine 100,000 Raven by January of 2023? It's gonna, don't worry if that sounded confusing, it's gonna be a lot clearer right about now. So here we can see the source of my my different numbers as well. But yeah, let's move on. So to mine 100,000 Ravencoin by January of 2023, let's look at the 1050 Ti to start, because we've been using that as an example. You would need 21 1050 Ti's, like 21 GPUs of the 1050 Ti, which would cost you, just to buy those GPUs, would cost you almost $2,500. And the sort of total power needed in your rig, right? Because you would need, it would have to be 2 rigs because of 21 GPUs, but like the total power those would pull would be almost 1400 watts. And the total consumed electricity would be like 18.6 thousand kilowatt hours. So the initial cost for the GPUs plus the cost of the electricity to mine 100,000 Raven with 1050 Ti's by January 2023 would be $4,347.70. So let's have a look at this list a little bit here, because it actually started being a lot closer than what I thought. They're all kind of around 4,000 to 5,000, except for like the 3080 Ti and the 3090. So let's use the 3090 as an example here, right? To mine 100,000 Raven, like by January 2023, with 3090s, you'd need 3 3090s, which the initial cost of that is like $7,000. Now it would only consume around 1,000 watts, so your power cost isn't that much. It only would consume like 13,000 kilowatt hours. But because 3090s are so expensive, your total cost would still be like $8,500. So like an easier way to say this is like, through mining, what's the cheapest way to get 100,000 Ravencoin by January 2023, right? So if you want to do it through 3090s, you'd have to pay $8,500. But if you want to do it through 1050 Ti's, you only have to pay $4,350 roughly. But now, what is the actually like most cost efficient way? So let's now sort this spreadsheet by this column. And we'll see that the most price efficient way to mine 100,000 Ravencoin by January 2023 is to buy 11 1650 supers, because that will get you 100,000 Raven for just $4,155-ish, right? That's pretty good. Like, if Raven goes to $10, you basically you made an investment of $4,000 and you made $1 million. You know, that is a pretty sick return on investment. Yeah, and as you can see down here, the 3090 is the worst. I mean, it's still only like 8,500, and if Raven goes to $10 and you've made $1 million, that's still you won't care at that point, right? I'm just reiterating again, this is not financial advice. I have no idea like Ravencoin might absolutely tank and go to zero, but that's sort of the point of this as well. You know, if you do it through 1650 supers, then and Ravencoin goes to zero, you will only have lost $4,000 versus $8,500. But so what's interesting here is, if you want to build it with 1650 supers, you kind of need, like, you need a pretty specialized motherboard, you know, to be able to fit 11 GPUs. Like, you'd need something like the ASRock, like mining motherboard that will take 11 GPUs, right? It will take 13. But that's kind of like a more expensive motherboard, or you'd have to split this into 2 different rigs, where then you'd have to buy, you know, 2 motherboards, 2 CPUs, 2 sticks of RAM, and so on. So what's very interesting then is that just for like $180 more, if we look out here, you could mine 100,000 Raven by January 2023 with 6 3060s. So that's pretty interesting, because you could very easily make a 6 GPU rig. You know, you just have to that's just like a regular gaming motherboard. And the other interesting thing there is it only would take about 800 watts. Like that's only for the GPUs, add another 150 for the system total, you're at around 1,000, and then add the 80% rule. You need like a 1,200 watt power supply. But that's still like, you only need kind of a single power supply for that, like a 1,200 watt power supply. That is, it's a very realistic rig to build, especially considering that I'd say out of all sort of like the newer generation graphics card, the 3060, like the regular 3060, is probably the easiest one to get your hands on right now. And also it kind of doesn't really matter if it's the new LHR model or anything like that, and the, you know, the old Ethereum hash rate limiter doesn't matter either, because we're mining Ravencoin on it anyway. So that is looking really interesting as well. And then of course, if you're really talking about just like what is a easy GPU to get your hands on, 1050 Ti, you know, that's only a few dollars more for the actual GPUs than the 3060s. Now you'd have to definitely build that into 2 rigs, and it does consume more power, but just because these are kind of older GPUs and they're 4 GB, and you know, they are probably going to be the easiest to get your hands on in this whole list. I'm guessing, but that would be my guess. Of course, you need to get 21 of them, but they're so cheap, and in the end you end up spending about the same amount. And actually the initial cost, so that's also something to look at here actually, which the initial cost is just like what is the cost of the GPUs. So what would 21 1050 Ti's cost? And that's just $2,500. So you're spending about $2,500 on GPUs, and you're spending about another 1,800 or so on electricity over the like year and a half until January of 2023, for a total cost of $4,350. So that is also something to take into account, like the initial cost of the build, because that can be prohibitive for some people, you know. So then it might be better to go for a build of, you know, 21 1050 Ti's rather than 6 3060s, because the 6 times 3060 rig would cost, like just for the GPUs, would cost $3,250 roughly. So yeah, I do believe that is it. As I've said, I'm going to put a link to the spreadsheet in the description of the video, but to sum it up, if you're wanting to mine 100,000 Raven by January of 2023, there are quite a few options to do so for pretty cheap, both including buying the cards and like electricity costs taken into account as well. I think for me personally, what looks the most appealing is probably either, well, it's one of these 3 at the top, obviously, because they are all sort of worth it for mining Raven, since they're all sort of cards that can't really mine Ethereum efficiently. The 3060 Super is obviously very attractive because it does, like, the rig won't consume that much power, which means not as much heat. It's a very simple rig to build, which is 6 GPUs. However, of course, it is the most expensive rig to build initially among this like top bunch. Then you have the 1050 Ti's, which that's probably the cheapest rig to build initially, but of course that one will cost more to run because it will consume more power. And then you have the 1650 Super rig, which is kind of in between the 2. So yeah, let me know if this has been helpful in the comments. And what you got to do now, I guess, is click over there, because there will be another video there that you can watch. So I'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.